Okay, we're back. And if there were any technical problems, that was my fault. I decided to download The Irishman as soon as the gala started, and it's just a very large file. But the good thing is that we were able to have some conversations at our tables. And Megna, the best thing about Zoom tables is you can actually hear people talking.
Exactly. Once the Zoom begins. I mean, I think today is a great example of how this new world we're in, everything's a little uncertain, but the show still goes on, which is what happened, fortunately, at my table.
And what we have right now is 1 minute left until the online auction closes. This is your chance to get those final bids in for that jewelry or the dinner with us, your WBUR hosts.
Now, that catered dinner for 10 with the WBUR host of your choice, Meghna Chakrabarty, is always very popular. And importantly, that offer will be good until we can all be back together in the same space again. But tonight is just beginning.
So please wrap up those last bids and now settle in and make yourself comfortable as the program begins. Let's roll.
With Joyce in an isolation room, hooked up to IV fluids and an EKG, a team of obstetricians and infectious disease specialists confer. She's their first COVID-positive pregnant patient.
Chelsea has the greatest rate of confirmed coronavirus cases of the 40 largest cities in Massachusetts. Maria Belen Powers worries the people of Chelsea are about to see death on a level never before seen.
While many businesses are shut down right now, grocery delivery is exploding, and that's keeping people like Teresa Woodford pretty busy.
I wish I had a hazmat suit. It's so busy here. It's ridiculous.
Before going in, she puts on her mask and gloves and douses her shopping cart in a cloud of Lysol.
Son Chris just had an idea. It was what?
To get my dad into a bucket truck and bring him up to the third floor to see my mom.
Oh, I was really excited to just get up on the way to go close to my wife. I held this homemade sign that I had, "I love you, sweetheart."
Wearing a face mask in public is no longer a request, it's a requirement. That's the word today from Governor Charlie Baker.
Earlier today, I signed an executive order requiring residents to use a face covering in public places when they cannot socially distance from others.
Serving the public, reporting the truth, enriching lives. That was a brief but powerful glimpse of our work and what has been unfolding all around us these last 8 weeks. It is so wonderful to see so many of you here tonight, albeit virtually. I'm Margaret Lowe. I'm the CEO of WBUR. I hope you all enjoyed the time together at your tables, those of you who were able to make it. Sorry for the technical troubles. We're breaking ground here. I wish we could have fed you a delicious meal, but instead, I hope you were able to feast on good company and great conversation. You know, we actually thought a lot about whether going forward with this evening was the right thing to do. The complexity of this moment made that an important question to ask. But this community has been coming together for more than 20 years to recognize the importance of WBUR in Boston and beyond. And in these difficult times, your belief in us and in NPR is more important than ever. So thank you all for being here, for your enduring support. We know that no one's life is easy right now, so we feel especially grateful tonight. We actually have nearly 500 people joining us from all across the country. We're using multiple Zoom rooms, as you may have been able to tell, to try to fit everybody in, including Conan O'Brien, who's zooming in from Los Angeles. But we actually like to claim Conan as one of our own. He's a local boy. He grew up in Brookline, just a stone's throw from WBUR, and he's going to be here with us with NPR's Scott Simon, who's in Washington, D.C. I want to tell you a little bit about what's happening in BUR's world right now. Every single journalist, no matter what their beat, is covering some dimension of the coronavirus crisis. And like everyone else, they're living it too. And they've stayed on this story even as their own lives have been turned upside down. They're like first responders in a way. Their coverage is essential. Thankfully, they don't require the same level of risk as other first responders, but they're helping people make sense of what is happening in the world and where all this is headed, and that is vital. And this crisis has really brought out the very best in everyone. All of my colleagues at WBUR have been galvanized by this story, and our purpose has never been more clear. When there is so much loss of lives, loss of jobs, loss of control, the ability to actually do something that really matters feels meaningful for all of us. And this story is global, it's national, it's local, and it's so deeply personal too. And our journalists have found really creative ways to bring this story to life. Our reporter, Adrian Ma, he's the one who did that story about the Instacart shopper that you saw in the video. He told me that normally to do that kind of profile, he would spend a lot of time with someone, shadow them throughout their day. But because the virus, of course, makes that so incredibly risky, he asks the subject of that story, Teresa, to use her iPhone to record her thoughts, her feelings, her actions, what she was seeing all around her. And he told her to imagine she was making a diary for a friend who doesn't know anything about what she does, and to paint a picture of what a day is like for her. And then over the course of about 3.5 days, Teresa sent Adrian more than a dozen dispatches. And then beyond that, they spoke on the phone 4 times for conversation that Adrian taped. And as Adrian says, you know, private citizens like Teresa don't have any obligation to open a window into their lives for strangers to look through. But Teresa clearly understood the purpose of what she was doing. And now, thanks to her and to Adrian, we know what it's like for all those people trying to make a living delivering groceries during a pandemic. And then one of our photographers, Robin Lubbock, whose pictures you also saw, told me that like when he's driving around the city, he's just struck by the emptiness. But he said, you know, when you come across something like those heart-shaped thank you notes to healthcare workers, you see that emptiness is somehow filled with real emotion. He said, you know, fear, of course, of the virus, but also gratitude and love. And one of the roles as journalists is to be the eyes and ears for our audience. And in sound and in photographs and in words, the team has really delivered the news with clarity, with insight, and with compassion. So before we bring on tonight's guests, I want to thank Meghna and Jeremy. Jeremy, I will talk to you later about trying to download that big file. But thank you for kicking us off tonight. You guys are superstars. Thank you in advance to the incomparable Robin Young, who is going to be joining us a little later. And thanks to the entire WBUR staff. I really feel privileged to be leading such a remarkable group of people. They're resilient, they're imaginative, and they've been unwavering in their commitment to the work. I have a few more important thank yous to people who've made a huge difference in our life, in my life, since I began in this role in January. First, the chairman of the WBUR board, Paul Gannon. His energy, his endless generosity and smarts have been a game changer for WBUR and for me. And the WBUR board itself has surpassed expectations in every way. We're so lucky to have such a magnificent board of directors and a community board, a community advisory board whose dedication and wisdom is peerless. I also want to thank Boston University President Bob Brown. He's here with us tonight with his wife, Beverly Brown. She's a longstanding member of our community advisory board. BU, which, as you may know, holds the broadcast license for WBUR, and it's a community of more than 45,000 people, students, faculty, staff. And I must say that watching Bob navigate this moment in all its complexity is really, it's a masterclass in leadership. And I'm grateful for all that Bob is doing to keep the university on a steady course and for how deeply he believes in the work of WBUR. And my thanks to all of you for taking the leap with us tonight. We are clearly in early innings of this story, and we're going to have to find a way to sustain the work for months and years to come. And like so many organizations, we've been hit pretty hard by the economic fallout of this crisis. So your support now, as you know, is more crucial than ever. And we know that our job is to be your indispensable source of news, information, conversation, occasionally comfort as we try to make our way through this. So we are doubling down on this story and on our journalism. And a key part of that is as a dedication to our investigative reporting. Good investigative journalism holds power to account. It roots out facts that many people want to keep hidden, and it shines light in dark corners and reveals important truths. And to that end, a little more than a year ago, we hired Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter Christine Wilmson to lead our investigations team. And then last summer, Beth Healy joined us from the Boston Globe, where she was a member of the award-winning Spotlight team. Their first series of stories aired in late March. It was called Dying on the Sheriff's Watch, and it exposed profound neglect in county jails, where inmates in medical distress were ignored, even as their illnesses turned into emergency. And often those were with deadly consequences. And the story's urgency has been underscored because COVID-19 has been ripping through Massachusetts county jails. And now I'm pleased to announce that we are growing our investigations team and teaming up with ProPublica. And this partnership is made possible thanks to an extraordinary gift from Jim and Kathy Stone and Paul and Ann Sagan. ProPublica's investigative newsroom is in a class by itself, and the Stones and the Sagans understood that WBUR and ProPublica are a powerful pairing, and their gift is going to allow us to expand our commitment to investigative reporting, and no doubt working with ProPublica will strengthen and amplify WBUR's journalism. With that good news, it is time finally to get on with the show. We have a spectacular lineup tonight. Michael Barbaro is the host of The Daily. It's the wildly popular New York Times podcast. It boasts more than 1 billion downloads. That is billion with a B. It is also a public radio show, and it will air tonight on WBUR for the very first time and every weeknight going forward. And this news actually has special meaning to Lisa Tobin. She's the executive producer of New York Times Audio, and with her colleagues at the Times, she created The Daily. And we feel a tiny bit like proud parents because Lisa actually got her start as a producer for WBUR. In fact, I had the pleasure of meeting Lisa for the very first time at a BUR gala, and I know that being here with all of us tonight feels like something of a homecoming for Lisa. And for those of you who don't know The Daily, you're actually in for something very special. The show is around 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week. It is audio storytelling at its best, exquisite narrative, sound rich, and produced with attention to every nuance and detail. And it's powered by the New York Times newsroom and some of the finest reporters on the planet. And that includes, of course, Michael, who used to cover politics for the Time, but found his true calling as one of the most incisive interviewers on the air. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Michael Barbaro and Lisa Tobin, who are joining us from Hudson, New York, and our own Kimberly Atkins, who's a former trial lawyer who luckily for us became a journalist and really knows how to prosecute a story. And she's with us from Washington, D.C., where she covers politics for WBUR with a focus on New England. And she also happens to be an avid listener to The Daily. Take it away, Kimberly.
Thank you so much, Margaret. And thank you to Michael and Lisa for joining us tonight. I'm very excited to talk to you about the podcast, The Daily, which I am a big fan of. Margaret is right. So I just want to start out by saying, you know, there seems to be a billion podcasts out there right now. What is it about The Daily that has made it break through and become so popular the way that it has?
I think what makes The Daily so special is the way we choose to tell stories. We tell one story a day. We tell it in a narrative style over 25 minutes. And that allows us to take real risks in the kinds of stories we tell. We could talk to one child for 25 minutes about the nature of grief in the middle of a pandemic. We can talk to somebody in Italy who's a doctor in a hospital for 25 minutes and just go deep into their experience, what it feels like for them, what it sounds like for them. And we have at our backs the New York Times newsroom, 1,200 journalists with access to the most extraordinary stories of our time who we can talk to and do talk to on the show, and who allow us to talk to the people they talk to in turn and produce an extremely vibrant range of stories.
And so in our current state where we are in our homes, staying safe at home, it seems that it would be difficult. I mean, one of the things that makes The Daily so great to listen to is the connection that you have with the people that you talk to, the connection with those subjects. It feels very personal. It brings us in as if we are right there with you. So how do you accomplish that kind of storytelling when everyone is in a different place?
Miraculously.
Yeah, I mean, we 2 months ago, you had told us that we would all be working from home, and that, with very little notice and no training or warning, we would be talking to our colleagues who typically we are sitting in the studio with. Michael's sitting across the table. There's eye connection. They're able to really speak to one another in, like you said, in an intimate way. It would have been very, very hard for me to imagine how that would work. And yet,
if it would work.
And somehow it has. And Michael's got a little microphone here that plugs into his iPhone. We have Times reporters and sources recording into their voice memos on their iPhones, recording their end of the conversation, shipping them to the producers on our team. Sources, the governor of Michigan. Gretchen Whitmer, she self-synced into her voice memo on her phone and then uploaded it onto the Google Drive and sent it to us.
Well, my favorite moment in that interview was when we had to gently kind of scold the governor of Michigan. No, you really can't hold the phone directly to your mouth like this, because as anyone in audio knows, your P's will pop and it will be really bad. And we coaxed her into finally holding the phone up to her face.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the congresswoman, she also uploaded to the Google Drive. So it's been incredible how much both sources and reporters and the producers on our team, of course, have adapted to the moment with no warning. But when you hear the show, I'm not sure you can hear the difference, which actually kind of pains me to say, given all the work that goes into those nice studios
and all the money.
Well, we can't make these things work without the wonderful producers and editors that we all rely on in the broadcast biz. But the coronavirus hasn't just changed the way you tell stories, it has become the story in such a major way. And if the podcast is about people, one of the people that you talked to as the coronavirus story began to unfold was Donald McNeil. He's the science writer at the New York Times, and he specializes in covering epidemics. And on February 27th, fairly early on, he was on the show, and he really made you and some of the other listeners begin to take notice of what was happening. Let's listen to a little bit of that.
Okay, so during this year, when a vaccine would be under development but not yet available, paint a portrait of what is likely to happen. Now, I know science and health reporters here do not like to speculate, but I am going to, with your permission, ask you to speculate a little bit about what that year looks like, the worst case scenario and the best case scenario.
I don't know what's going to happen, but keep in mind, the 1918 flu was really the 1918-1919 flu. Started in the spring, faded in the summer, came back like a monster in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a worst case kind of scenario, that we don't have a vaccine yet by the fall, and the disease hits us hard then.
In that scenario, could almost every person in the country who's not a child get the virus?
Some big chunk of the country, 30, 40, 50%, are likely to get a new virus when it blows through. And if you don't get it in the first wave, you might get it in the second wave.
And 2% lethality rate of 50% of the country. I don't want to do that math. It's really, really awful.
It's a lot of people. It means, you don't die. 80% of people have mild cases, but you know somebody who dies.
It's pretty horrible.
Yeah.
That was in February. Quite a wake-up call. Michael, talk a little bit about the impact of that.
I actually want, Lisa, I want you to talk a little bit about Donald.
So, like you said, February 27th, I believe, is the day that episode ran. And I believe it was only 1 or 2 days before that the CDC official had sort of spoken out of turn and had said it's not a matter of if, but when this virus really comes to the US. And up until that point, we had really been covering the story as an international story. We've been talking to our colleagues who are on the ground in China, and we've been doing sort of these narrative accounts of life on the ground in China. But we really didn't know what to make of what was headed for our country. And so when we heard that comment from the CDC, we sort of looked around and said, it feels like, our default mode is to go into these narratives, but it feels like what really is needed in this moment is an explainer, is to really just ask the questions that everybody's wondering. And so we went to our science desk and they said, the person that you need to speak to is Don McNeil. He is the guy on this.
Right. Yeah. One of our colleagues said that there's a moment in every career where the spotlight turns to you and the light is shining on you. And the question is, will you rise to the occasion? And Donald McNeil Jr. has been the man in the spotlight of this pandemic. And in our pre-chat with Donald about the virus, we were the ones feeling the wake-up call. Here we were on the phone with him, and he was starting to outline a scale of seismic change. And mind you, this is February of 2027, so 2 or 3 weeks before the United States would take any significant action on the coronavirus. He began to outline a world that almost felt surreal and alarmist. Quarantines, social distancing, schools closing. And he said things I'll never forget. He said, people you know and you love will die. Remember, February 27th.
I remember being worried to run the episode because if he had gotten it wrong, it was going to be a really, he was going to be way over his skis in a way that would have been very bad for the Times. But of course,
wow.
Yeah, sadly, he wasn't over his skis. And we have heard from hundreds and hundreds of listeners who said that episode, in the kind of sober tones of Donald McNeil, that was the moment that this pandemic became real for them. This virus became serious for them. They stocked up. They changed their behavior. They called people who they knew who they thought might not be taking it seriously and said, this is a really big deal.
Wow. Well, I want to bring in another voice from the podcast, that of 12-year-old Lily Brimehorst, whose grandfather, Craig, died from the disease. Michael, tell us about Tilly.
So Tilly is a remarkable, as you said, 12-year-old girl from Minnesota. And we spoke to her just a few weeks ago. The backstory is that everyone who has watched the death toll rise in the U.S. sees that many of those who have died are older, 65 and older. And that means that there are a lot of grandparents dying and a lot of grandchildren processing grief at a very young age. And we wondered what it would be like to see this pandemic through the eyes of a grandchild who had lost a beloved grandparent. And we weren't sure that such a conversation could sustain the daily, 25 minutes with a 12-year-old kid. And then we actually talked to her, and we realized that we were having a conversation with somebody really special.
Yeah, so the clip that you're going to hear is Tilly has already spoken about the very close relationship that she had with her grandfather. She's described going up on the roof to look at stars with him. And then she's described to Michael when she found out that he had gotten sick. He had gone on a trip to the Middle East with his church group. He had come home, he had become ill, and he's in the hospital. And she's describing how she's coping with that. And she's talking about being alone at night. Let's listen.
I remember, so when I heard about that he was put in the hospital because it got worse, Mom was like, do you want to sleep with one of his shirts? I was like, yeah. So she brought me the shirt. It was just like a greenish brown t-shirt.
Were you wearing it, or was it just beside you?
I was wearing it. it felt like really, really big on me. It's kind of like cold, but it felt really soothing to wear it though. I wanted to feel like I was close to him. I was giving him a hug, and I thought about him the whole night. I prayed that he would make it through, that he wouldn't have to go. But my prayer really didn't come true.
Mm-hmm. How you holding up over there?
I'm okay. It's hard talking about it, but it also makes me happy to talk about how great he was and what happened.
You know, I've lost my grandparents too. It's one of the kind of sad, inevitable things that it means to be alive, is that the people before you die, and it's just really hard.
Yeah. It is really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that was really gripping, Michael. How did you get through that interview in that way?
You know, it was hard. One of the things we allow for on the daily, and I'm really proud of this fact, is we allow for tears. We allow for the host to lose his composure. It happens from time to time. We also relish the chance to have a conversation with a child that is as respectful and real as a conversation we'd have with any adult, any governor, and it's something we're really proud of. Seeing the world through the eyes of children, we have done it actually even on impeachment. When we interviewed a child about the way he
the morning of the impeachment hearings.
And it turns out that it never feels corny and it never feels cliched. It actually, when it's done right, is an exquisitely complicated way of seeing the world.
So tell me a little bit more how you come up with shows. And you're not just talking about the pandemic right now. As a listener, I'm grateful for that. But you're talking to one of my favorite recent podcasts was when you were talking about the invasion of the murder hornets, and you're talking to a beekeeper. How do you decide who your subjects are?
Yeah, we have been trying to be very conscious of what is the right balance in this moment and how can we offer relief and comfort and other news to people while also, obviously fulfilling the tremendous responsibility that we all have in this moment to cover the news and then also to cover it in unexpected ways. So to, yes, talk to Don McNeil and to really explain to people what is going on and to give them all that information, but then to also look over here and say, and what about a voice like Tilly? So we're really trying to find that balance. The team is only 3 years old at the times. And when we started, it was myself, Michael, and 2 other people making this daily news show. Now it's a team of, the whole New York Times audio team is now more than 40 people. There's about 20 wildly talented producers and editors working on the daily. And it's really everybody coming together every morning. Right now is on a Google Hangout call and really just look, people have read the paper, they've spoken to our colleagues in the newsroom. We're sitting in on international meetings, we're sitting in on national meetings, we're sitting in on politics meetings, and we're really trying to absorb as much as we can about what our colleagues are working on. But we're also just asking ourselves, what do you want to hear right now? What feeling are you having that you want to feel explored? What sort of voice are you craving to hear in this moment? What feels like it would be enlightening to you? What questions you have that maybe you think other people might have too, but they may not be willing to admit that they don't know the answer to. So it's really a robust conversation every morning with the people who make the show, who then are able to go around. And that's sort of the power of the daily, is that we can ask the questions or wonder or crave a voice, but then we can go draw in the newsroom to say, I bet over here, this colleague might have the answer.
Right. One of the discoveries we made when we created the daily was that there were probably decades of times, recordings of interviews and raw field tape that went into the dustbin of history. And we were never going to let that happen. We wanted to make sure that Times reporters were going to be recording everything they did and sending it to us. And like with the murder hornets, when our colleague went out into the woods with a man who was trying to destroy a murderous hornet net, he was going to be recording everything on his iPhone. And that has made a huge difference to the kind of textured, kind of layered quality of the show.
Well, we really appreciate that as listeners, and we really appreciate both of you taking the time to join us this evening for this gathering. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we are so excited to be joining WBUR as a show. We're so grateful to you all.
We are too. We are very excited too. And it is now my pleasure to present you NPR's Scott Simon, who is going to be in conversation with the one, the only, the late night host extraordinaire from Massachusetts, Conan O'Brien. Take it away, Scott.
Thanks so much, Kimberly. I hope everybody can hear me and see me, and Conan too, for that matter. Let me know if something is wrong. I just want to say something at the top. I'm very grateful that WBUR asked me to be a small part of the proceedings tonight. I think this is one of those occasions when those of us who do this for a living understand that what we do is more importance than ever. This is what we do. This is why a lot of us got into the news business. We don't know exactly what's over the hill or in the horizon, but we know there are moments that test us and challenge us, and we want to be here to be able to provide the American people and the people of the Boston area with what we can. High quality news, solid and reliable information in a time of a lot of suspicion and superstition and often mistrust, and also sometimes just those moments of comfort, being good companions when we can do that. So thank you very much for the opportunity. And I hope we're connected with Conan O'Brien. Conan, can you hear me? See me?
I hear you perfectly. And you look amazing. I can see you as well. Scott, can you see me?
I can see you, and you look perfect and amazing as well. So you grew up within a stone's throw of WBUR.
Yeah. I grew up in Brookline, Massachusetts. I went to the elementary schools there, and then I went to Brookline High School. I graduated in 1981, and my father is still working for Brigham and Women's Hospital.
Yes.
And his field is, ironically, if that's the correct use of that term right now, has always been infectious diseases. So
epidemiology, I had that written down.
And he's been working on that my entire life, longer than my life. That's been his specialty. So, and he is, when you talk in your introduction about hard facts and real information, that's something I grew up with, was a father who is a scientist. And so that's what I've always leaned towards, especially in this crisis, is what does the science tell us? What does common sense tell us? And so that has been a big stabilizer for me.
I'm not proud of this question, but I want you to go back in your history a little bit, if you could, and tell me, if you will, about the bad clams.
Oh my God. Okay, you've done your research. Many of your listeners right now believe that the bad clams probably is a meal I had in the North End that didn't end well. That is not the case.
Jeremy's sister is the chef, but go ahead.
Yeah, the bad clams was the name of a very, very, very short-lived band that I was in. I was the drummer, and it was when I was in college. When I say short-lived, we may have played 2 gigs.
Oh.
And then I left the group. I was the drummer, and I left the group because I knew that we weren't going anywhere and that comedy was my field. So I left. I was shocked to hear that I had been replaced immediately. So I went to the next gig to see who they replaced me with, and it was a electronic drum machine. Small box that plugged into the wall. And guess what, Scott? That the crowd liked it a lot more than me. So I was replaced by a transistor radio-sized box, and I lost.
Yeah. You ever look over your shoulder now to see if there's an electronic drum machine about to replace you?
Listen, I'm quite certain that I am about 3 years away, if I'm lucky, from being replaced by something the size of an iPhone. And
all of us. All of us. But until then, we'll have a good time.
We'll have a good time until then. Yeah.
Is it hard to do comedy now, or more important than ever, all at the same time?
I would say there are certain things that are harder right now. What I find is that mostly it's technical, meaning when I do my show, as I can see, you're shooting this yourself at home because you're socially distancing, as we all should. I'm doing that. I'm doing my show. I'm shooting a lot of it on either a laptop or an iPhone on a tripod that keeps tipping over. And it's very frustrating. I find that I'm of the generation that I'm still kind of a Luddite. I don't really, I'm comfortable with a pen and paper, and I'm constantly been surrounded by people who understand technology. I don't understand it. I'm not allowed to have people in the house that will help me. So I find that frustrating. As for the comedy,
my technical crew here is our 17-year-old and our 13-year-old. I highly recommend your at-home help. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a 14-year-old son who became smarter than me when he was about 8 and has contempt for me now and for a long time, and he should, but he understands these things. He helps me out a lot. But the real question is about comedy right now. I think people are thirsty for comedy. What I like to do, for the most part, is silly comedy, comedy that maybe tries to find something silly about the situation that we're in. And I do find that people are hungry for that. And we're getting a lot of response from people that are seeing the show and responding to us on social media and telling us that they're hungry for silliness right now. They want to break from the drumbeat of just depressing news and stuff that scares them. So that's where I think people are they want a sense of continuity too. So I think when if they see someone that they've been watching for a number of years, I'm sure you have listeners that have been listening to you for many, many, many years. They just like that you're there. They like the continuity of knowing that you're there, hearing your voice. And so without being self-important, because I find what I do to be absolutely absurd and no way to make a living, but I do think just being there for people and providing continuity is important right now.
There is a lot that's absurd about the way we're living right now, isn't there?
Yes. Yeah. I think what's fascinating and what we've found to be very interesting is people are seeing, first of all, and I found this to be very refreshing, but immediately when this crisis hit, when celebrities started to speak up and say, well, I think we're out, people immediately cut them off and said, this is not a time for celebrities. And I thought that was fantastic. I really applauded that. I thought, in the 19th century, actors had to use the rear entrance at a restaurant because they were so disrespected and comedians. And I think, I think we should go back to that time. I think we're a dodgy group. So I like that I often don't look great. I don't have any makeup on. The lighting's no good. There's no applause. There is no audience there laughing.
Yeah.
People are seeing things stripped down to their essence, and I find that kind of refreshing. I think it's humbling. It's refreshing. And if things truly are funny or good, you can sense it in the moment, and people still pick up on that. They don't need all the falderall. They don't need all the high gloss. So,
may I ask?
No, you may not. Does anyone ever say that?
All the time. which brings it up. The people I'm going to mention. Do you try your material out on your family?
That doesn't go too well. I want to tell you. They are.
But who else is there now?
Well, fortunately, we have Zoom, and so I can still. I'm very fortunate that we're still able to deliver our show.
Yeah.
To Turner, we're still able to deliver our podcasts because of the way that technology exists now. We're able to do all of that, so we're able to employ everybody, which means when I call them up and say, get on a Zoom call so we can talk for 20 minutes and I can try some stuff out on you and you can tell me some ideas. They have to do it because I'm still paying them. So that's the lovely side benefit.
Yeah. What do you think we ought to be, as we go through these days, keeping in our memories as we go on, when hopefully the world gets back to some semblance of normal? What do you hope we take from these times?
I hope people think of me a lot. I hope that people, I hope I become the face of this time. I have to honestly say, I think that I have never, ever been more appreciative of little things in my life. Mm-hmm. I never realized what a miracle a restaurant was before they went away. Do you know what I mean? And how much, I mean, when you think about it, we used to go to not long ago, we took it for granted that you could go someplace and sit down and say to someone, bring me these things, and they would. And they would set it in front of you and you would talk and you would see other people in the restaurant and you would chat with them. Mm-hmm. There are little things like that that existed for 200 years that I realized was just a big part of the fabric of our lives. And I hope that we go back to appreciating that and appreciating the people that wait on us and the people that make that part of our lives possible. That is what I hope comes out of this, is that humans tend to bounce back quickly in a good way and also in a negative way. We tend to, we're very elastic, we're very adaptive, but then we go right back to, I mean, I lived in New York on 9/11 and I saw how miraculous everyone was from 9/11. And then I saw people starting to be rude to each other and starting to say, excuse me, where's my creme brulee? I ordered it 3 minutes ago. How dare you? And there was still a smoldering pit down near Wall Street. And I thought, that's probably not the nicest side of humanity. I hope we do a little better this time. I just hope that we remember and we don't take for granted all the wonderful things we have.
Help us understand your reaction when you follow the news. And we hope, obviously, NPR is part of that diet. Is there a part of you that says, that's outrageous, that's ridiculous, but it is good material?
Well, first of all, I want to make it very clear. I don't support any kind of public television or radio. I insist there be a lot of ads. And I insist there be another agenda when I'm listening.
Sponsorship. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But unless if a giant oil company isn't involved, I have no patience. But I will say, I would say, people often say to me, oh my God, as a comedian, you must love these times. And I say, no, I don't, because I am a citizen first and a comedian second. And sometimes when things become too absurd in Washington, it feels like shooting fish in a barrel to do comedy about it. Do you know what I mean? Which is why sometimes I've tried to, during this crisis, not mention certain people in Washington, because I think that's being taken care of by so many comedians. I'd like to just try and find some things in our everyday lives that will make people laugh. But I sometimes find it hard when some things about our current president can get so absurd and so ridiculous that I think it's impossible to do comedy about it. You know, it feels almost like shooting a really largemouth bass in a small barrel with a shotgun. Do you know what I mean? And I don't, it also doesn't bring me that much joy. I get a little depressed about the news. So that's why I think there are some people out there that prefer to laugh about something about what we're going through right now that doesn't necessarily relate to politics or something incredibly depressing that a certain world leader said that day. You know, so I don't find that President Trump is making it easier to do comedy sometimes I think he's making it too easy, and that's taking the fun out of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. No, of course it does. If you're a professional, I mean, why? Yeah, keep high standards.
Yeah, well, I mean, no, I don't believe in that, clearly. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Scott. But I do believe that I do believe that that there's always a way to find comedy in any situation. Sometimes I feel that Washington is almost working too hard to provide it for us, and it doesn't leave comedians much to do other than say, can you believe what this person said today? And that, I think, can be distressing for the state of, if you're interested in making comedy that feels, interesting. So that's a little bit of a challenge right now, I think, across the board.
I hope you don't mind me asking, but I'm moved to ask this, given that you're from an academic family, got into comedy. Has it happened? How would you think you'd react if your children came to you and said, "We want to try comedy"?
Well, I used to say to my wife when they were born, I said, someday, if one of them ever comes to us and says, I'm interested in show business, I'm going to break a leg off the nearest chair and start swinging. I know that doesn't sound appropriate. That's something I would not really do. I'd like to make that clear. But I would worry for them, because I think every parent is very protective of their children, and they don't want them to get their feelings hurt. What's interesting is I find myself not wanting my children to experience a lot of the pain that I experienced in a career that's been filled with ups and downs. Mm-hmm. And then I think, well, why is it I can't bear the idea of them going through that when I went through it? So
you're your children. Why?
Yes, exactly. But still,
bear that for them, right? That's the idea.
What I would like them to do is, if they really wanted to do that, and I've really tried to keep my career as far away from my family as possible, but if they really wanted to do that, I would want them to go in with open eyes and know that it's not a fair business. Not that a lot of businesses are, but it's constantly changing. You can work incredibly hard and not make it. I don't see a rhyme or reason sometimes to why I had good fortunate moments and other people didn't. And they have to be ready for that. So if they go in, if one of my kids comes to me and says, or if any young person comes to me and says, I'm interested in doing what you do, I always say, why? If they say, because I want to be famous, I think a giant red light goes off. Mm-hmm. That's a terrible reason to want to do this, because I always tell them fame is just a completely odorless, colorless, nutrition-free broth. It's not anything. If you love it and it's something you're passionate about, and it's hard for you to imagine not doing it, then you have my support.
Thank you very much for talking to us. I know you got to get your show on the air tonight as well.
Yeah, we're shooting. It's funny. We did the interview already, but now we're going to shoot the top of the show and the wraparounds, and then we're going to feed that to Atlanta, and then that's going to go out. So, but very happy to do this. A big fan of WBUR and of yours, by the way, incidentally, and very, very proud to be from Boston. And thinking about everybody there right now, including my family. They refuse to answer my calls, but they have very good reason.
Well, maybe they're on the Zoom call right now, Conan O'Brien, thank you so much for being with us. Very good to be with you. We've had a change in program, so I want to hand this over now to my colleague, Robin Young, who has, let me take a look here, who has something to say about fund to calls. Bye-bye.
Hi, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Scott.
Hi there, Robbie.
So much. And what a great interview that was. Hi, everybody. Boy, what a great evening we've had. We had Michael and Lisa Tobin, Margaret, who was, before she was a producer, she was an intern at Here and Now, always had her eye on some distant digital horizon. Very proud of her. And then, of course, Kimberly doing the interview. And as we just heard, Scott and Conan O'Brien. So how's everybody doing? Are you enjoying the evening? Oh, rhetorical, because you can't answer because you're muted. The wonderful thing is that we can see each other. We played a game at our table. What is it that you miss the most about this pandemic, during this pandemic? And for me, it's human contact. You know, it's being able to speak to people. But now, at least we can see you. I'm looking at this grid. I'm realizing the romper room lady, I know I'm going way back, but the romper room lady, she was kind of prescient, because just like her, I see Michael Goldstein and I see Liz Callanan and I see everybody out there. And it's just so wonderfully reassuring to know that those of you who have been there with us for so long are going to be with us through this tough time. But just a little cautionary note, later this evening, I'm going to ask you all to stand up under the guise of taking a stretch. And it's actually just to see if you have your pants on. I'm looking at you, Jim Stone. All right. This is a different time, isn't it? I mean, coronavirus has changed everything except your support of WBUR and our fierce commitment to be there for you through whatever happens. And I guess both of our willingness to do what it takes to make sure that that happens, our being able to cover this. And you all just pivoted on a dime. Our fearless leader, Margaret Lowe, who we will follow anywhere, said, let's have a Zoom meeting. And you said yes, even though many of you are probably going, how does this work? And there you are. And we're going to be there for you. Our reporters have been on the front line from the start. One famously with her microphone taped to the end of a hockey stick so that she could safely socially distance and report. And it's all to help you and us. We're a part of this story too. It's impacting us as well. Help us all make sense of this pandemic and understand its impact. And this isn't something that we just came to late. I am so proud of how ahead of this curve we've been, primarily because we have people like Kerry Goldberg and Martha Biebinger, who've been all over health issues long before this moment. And then Shannon Dooling, who was all over Chelsea before that city became a hotspot because of her immigration reporting. We were ready for this, I feel. And I know that the health impact has hit some of you very close to home. I'm so sorry. You know, someone at our table is visiting his mother in Natick in a nursing home and holding up that hand to the window that he can't get through to touch a loved one. And so I feel if people can do that, then we can do this and we're going to be fine. But financially, the impact has been huge. We know it has for many of you. And for us, at a time when WBUR's public service couldn't be more essential, let's not sugarcoat it. This has kneecapped us. You know, support is always critical, but never more so than tonight. And so now I'm going to ask you to dig deep into those pajama bottoms we know you're all wearing and help us raise another $100,000 tonight. Now, I know that is a lot, but we pledge in return to stay all over this story. I know that for me, it's seamless now. There's no more I work and I do other things. I am just working. The last thing I do at night is have a conversation with producer Karen Miller-Medson. And she's usually the first person I speak to in the morning, like around 5 o'clock too, because we have a great idea. And by the way, she is quarantining at home with her husband, Dr. Medson, who's one of the top ER docs at Boston Medical. They can't share a kitchen or a bathroom or a bed. They are separate and together, kind of like we are, for the health of their community. This is kind of a stare down for us with COVID-19, and we're not going to be the ones to blink first. So I'm asking you to please support these reporters, producers, engineers who have made our work possible now. Again, we know this crisis has hit many people financially. So of course, participate at whatever level that you can. It's just, try to participate because we need you. And in keeping with the virtual theme tonight, you should have received a text with a link directing you to a way that you can give directly. But If you'd rather pledge now, we've covered that. We've sent you an email, and you can do that as well. Just please give what you can. Know that your gifts are our metaphorical face masks. You're our antibodies. You are what keeps WBUR healthy, and I don't think it's a stretch in these times to say keeps us alive. You are our heartbeat. Now, we can't shake hands. They're saying we may never shake hands again. I hope that's not true. But I sign off with what has been my way of, giving a handshake, giving a hug. I pledge, to be there for you. And we really ask you to be there for us. And thank you so much. And now I'm going to return you to that fearless leader, Margaret Lowe.
So thank you, Robin. So beautifully said. There's almost nothing I can add. I would love you to stay right there if you would. And I would like to bring all our presenters back on our virtual Zoom stage if I can. Magna, Jeremy, Kimberly, Michael and Lisa, Scott, Simon. I suspect Conan is off and running by now. Thank you all for making this such a wonderful night in together. Mostly my thanks to all of you out there, hopefully happy and comfy. And as Robin says, in your pajama bottoms at home, your support makes everything we do possible. And now what I'd actually like to do is to bring everyone on screen with me together. You are going to be teeny tiny, but I want to give all of you who are with us tonight a big round of applause because you are our lifeline. So when I begin to see everybody here, okay, let's give everybody a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.